Hi everyone, it's Gene Calderon here again, going through some teachings that we have on this special week that we have coming up with the holiday known as Halloween quickly approaching. And so we gave a little bit of an insight on some of the ideas yesterday, and today we're going to continue in looking in some of those ideas, looking at another major factor when it comes to Halloween, and that is costumes and trick or treating. What is that? What is that about? How do we get here? What do we make of that as Christians? And is it something we ought to do? Well, in order to give a brief history of that, mostly from a Christian perspective, when we look at costumes and trick-or-treating as Halloween symbols and images and traditions, what do we know about it? Well, the strongest case that we have about how trick-or-treating began here in the United States is the idea that it came from the British Isles. The treat that we read about was something that was common during something known as Hallow Mass. And that usually took place from October 31st into November 2nd in the pre-Reformation British Isles. There existed a popular tradition called souling, S-O-U-L-I-N-G. The poor would move from door to door asking for food and drink in return for a prayer for the dead, in order to relieve their souls from purgatory or punishment or something of that sort. Again, when you talk about Christianity nowadays, the common theology, we don't believe in purgatory, but again, this was their tradition. This is, again, just an explanation of how things began. So I'm not saying you have to believe in purgatory, okay? All right, so it was common within those times to be able to give out things like baked bread or what they would call soul cakes. And many times there was frequent gifts such as apples or nuts or ale or even coins. And amongst the Protestants, the Reformation largely brought an end to that practice and praying for souls in purgatory, okay? But still, even the Protestants in those regions, they looked at souling, and it remained an important occasion for asking or begging for food and money from your rich neighbors. So if you were poor, if you were struggling, this was the day you could go to your neighbors and continue this tradition in asking for help in preparation for the coming cold and the dark months. And so it was common throughout the British Isles for people to go souling in disguise. And in some region, the costume visitors might come and they might even put on a little play with the costumes that they were dressed in order to portray some of the local legends or some of the religious themes that they were familiar with. And the common theme was that, in the end, evil was going to be defeated by good. And these traditions were probably the predecessors of our modern day Halloween costumes. Now, when we talk about the trick, well, wait a minute, isn't there a trick involved with the treats, okay? Yeah, according to one historian, there was things known as the goblins or the imps or the fairies or trolls even, and they were thought to do a lot of mischief on Halloween, especially in the British Isles at this time. And so for centuries, there was anonymous mischief that was expected on October 31st. And as a result, Halloween was a favorite time for young people to go out there and play practical jokes and pranks on other people. And the costumes helped disguise them and helped not them be known as who was the ones responsible for pulling these practical jokes. Now, these traditions easily came over to North America, and trick-or-treat grew out of a friendly threat or play a prank on someone who refused to give them a treat. And so when we see people dressed up in costumes, it came from a tradition, possibly more than likely, of people wanting to be in disguise, begging for food, or at the same time willing to offer a play. And the plays usually had the theme of good would defeat evil. And it was also a time of if we found people who were not generous or people who were not willing to share something to help the poor, then they would play a practical joke or prank on someone as a small rebuke against that person of not offering bread or cake or nuts or things of that sort. And so this is probably where that whole tradition came about trick-or-treating, smelling my feet, and all these other things, and so Is that something we as Christians need to condemn? Again, when we look at the history of it, there is nothing demonic or evil or things like that when it comes to what the reason was, as far as this history comes from, in dressing up in order to portray or hide or disguise yourselves for certain purposes. Okay, so I know there's probably other people who think about, yeah, when you dress up in things that are gory and dark and evil, yeah, I have a problem with that. But when it's dressing up just to kind of disguise yourself or play a certain character or things like that, we do that all the time. If you watch a movie, somebody's playing a character. If you go to a kid's play, somebody's playing a character. And usually, hopefully, the theme is good wins over evil. And that's kind of what Halloween is trying to portray, or at least the history of it was. And then sometimes when people enjoy the dark side of it more so, they emphasize that and they twist the story around. So we have to be careful with that. What do you dress for? What's the purpose? Is it for good, clean fun? Is it because you like the particular character you're dressed as? And is the character a good, clean character? Or is it your chance to act mischievous or to take it way too far in disguise and not be held accountable to it? So that's something we can consider and look at. So again, trick-or-treating, up to you whether or not you want to do it. The Bible doesn't specifically say you cannot dress up and play a character or play a role, but what is the intent behind your reasoning for doing this? So think about that. Read the scriptures. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and post them in there, and we will address them as best as we can. But we will continue in these teachings over the next couple of days. Hope to see you then. God bless you. Thanks for watching.